Now, where did I put it? Here it is. Welcome to the Toolbox, where we discuss the tools we utilize every day. Yours to use or toss. It's up to you. But I hope you enjoy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Tools for the Toolbox. I am Chance Burles, as you know, and I have an absolutely fantastic guest, and I am really excited to get into this, so I'm going to kick it off the way I always do with, who are you, and what is your military background?
Yeah, hi. So my name is Whitney and I think I kind of have a bit of an eclectic military background. I currently am serving in the Canadian military, and I'm an infantry sergeant. And I joined when I was literally 10 days after 16. So we can join when we're 16. And I was like, I'm going to do it. And my dad is in the military. He actually retired as a general. So for much of my career, I was the general's daughter, which was a load of fun. And so I joined. And I joined the infantry because my dad was in the infantry and I was 16 and I knew everything. So I did.
Yep, that makes perfect sense.
20-ish years later, I understand why maybe my dad would have thought that wasn't the greatest decision. However, I did it, and I beetled off to my QL2, QL3 at 16. I did a bunch of the reserve stuff through high school. I did it through university, had the Army pay for that. And then I started working full-time Class B contracts. And then I applied kind of out of the blue, thought it was a shoot for the stars, for a position in CSOR, which is the Canadian Special Operations Regiment. And I was selected for the position and I started working in their recruiting shop. And that was fantastic. So I worked in there and then I worked myself out of a job through a promotion. So I moved into individual training. And that gave me a lot of flexibility to start working as an instructor on a lot of specialized courses. And I got involved in some mental agility training and helping to co-facilitate that in that organization. And that's really what kind of started my passion into mental health. And I guess we'll probably dive into that in the conversation.
Oh, yeah.
My husband, we're a dual service couple. He works here in Ottawa, so I took a position in Ottawa here at the transition centers, which when I came here in 2017, it was the JPSU, and then it became the IPSC. Now there's a transition group, and I worked as a section commander. So basically all of the ill and injured soldiers that were releasing medically, they came under our caseloads. And we helped them move through that process. And that was kind of it for me. I knew that mental health and support was where I needed to be. So that's where that kind of stands for my military background.
Well, that's fantastic. You know, one of the things I really learned very quickly was being an instructor was so rewarding. And being able to see people, I called it the the aha moments, and you can see it when their eyes light up and they grasp a concept and just ding, and you're like, yes, yes. I had a kid that we were talking about machine gun theory, and in the middle of it, I was talking about the beaten zone, and he just kind of oh,
I was laid down.
Yes, exactly. And it was one of the most rewarding experiences. And then I also found I learned so much about myself. I was able to actually take the time and go, wow, these kids, literal kids, are looking at me going, holy crap, Master Corporal Burles is angry at me. Oh, geez. And it really makes you look at yourself and go, okay, well, why am I angry right now?
Huge.
Is it just such a huge leap? And I love talking to other instructors too, because we look at things a little differently.
Oh, huge. Absolutely.
I think.
When you're saying that, it made me think of in terms of growth as an instructor. My first BMQ that I ever taught on, I was a fresh master corporal just off my PLQ. I knew the world. And the only negative point I've ever gotten in a part 5 was that, Master Corporal Young needs to understand that the recruits, sometimes basically was like, learn at a different speed, and don't know all the material, because I would get frustrated. Like, how does he not get this? Like, how are they not picking this up? And that was like a complete flip for me, where I was like, oh, yep. Right. Yeah, they don't know this yet.
People learn differently.
And then, it moved from there. But like, teaching is, there's something in the soul for that. So.
Yep. And I think this is why, mental health has been such a step for me as well as you, is that we get to see those moments. We get to have those experiences with people as they start to realize their own mental health and their own strengths, their own weaknesses. And you're like, yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I love it.
You get to pass all that stuff on. So you've been in you were in for you're still serving?
I'm still serving. You were about to do math there.
For what, 20 years?
20 years.
Yeah, I was about to do math, so you can see it, right? Like,
not join the combat arms for math. Like,
well, I was an engineer. Yeah, that's what I'm supposed to be able to do math, right? Yeah.
Pick up my fingers. Yes, so I did. I actually just passed my 20 years in June. So 20 years, and now I am medically releasing. So I have a PTSD diagnosis from my service. And then, after 20 years in the infantry, there's like the back, the neck, the shoulders. I always think of it like military service, like dog years, where like, there's like 1 to 7 sort of thing. So it's like for every 1 year in the military, your body is actually like 7 years older. So I'm like actually like 90. So I'm in the transitioning process, which is kind of interesting being a section commander that was assisting in the transition process, and then going through the transition process myself. So, I'm a grad student now. So in my transition process, I'm doing my master's of military psychology with a specialization in military mental health. So it's like a dream program for someone like me. I'm just like, I get to go to school and learn about this stuff. It's fantastic. So I do that, and then anybody that's medically or even just released from the military knows the slew of appointments and paperwork that goes with it. So I'm managing that. I'm also a mom. I have a fabulous little 2-year-old who keeps me on my toes. And because I'm a service couple, I'm actually, my husband is deployed right now, so I'm doing the momming all on my own. And then I'll be releasing from the military on the 13th of October and transitioning into the civilian sector for D&D, teaching mental health, which is fantastic, on the 14th of October. So super busy. And then somewhere in there, I try and like eat and like
and try to take care of yourself and do stuff. And Yep. I remember that feeling. And especially transitioning it was very hard because I was still Master Corporal Burles. Like I had left the instructor cadre in Meaford and drove home. So I had a brand new 5-month-old baby and my wife, and I was like, the knife hand was just, it was all over the place. And, I had lots of difficulties and I learned a lot of lessons very quickly. Well, probably not quickly enough for my wife, but quickly as I could. Whatever, right? And I normally ask everybody about their transition and how they, lessons they could pass on. But I think what would be really great was, what do you pass on to people that are transitioning? Because you're in your transition right now. Yeah. I mean, this is part of your job, but do you think the most often do you say to people about their transition, how they can make it easier, how they can help themselves? What is that thing that comes up most?
I'd say it's threefold. So my first one is time. Don't think that this is something that like you can just wake up one day and be like, I'm leaving the army, and you do. Now, some people do. You can leave the army in 30 days, depending on your time in. But it is a process, and it takes time. And I think anybody who's been in that process knows that you don't really even know that you're in the process until like halfway through, and then there's this big like, oh my goodness moment, and then you kind of work your way down the other side. So time is number one. Use every second and plan as far ahead as you possibly can. The second one is use every single service that is available. I'm a little more bold when I tell it to other people. I'm just like, take the Army for every service they can give you.
Yep.
Absolutely. But my thought process on that, because a lot of people are very hesitant in seeking services for a variety of different reasons. But the services that are available are excellent compensation, especially in comparison to a lot of our partner forces around the world.
Yep.
However, even at the maximum, it will never make up for the sacrifices, the pain, whatever the injury is. So use it. And you're not taking the system, like the services are there, and if you're eligible for them, use them. Full out, use all of them, and then you'll be able to figure out what you do need and what you don't need. Which is, it's critical. And then the third one, and I think we'll probably get into it based on some of the questions for peer support, is find strength in being your own advocate. And if you can't, find somebody who will, because there's so many different aspects of the release process. And the transition it's years. It's a process that goes on for years. And you need to be able to find the strength and being able to, be an advocate for yourself in a system that still exists with rank structure. But in that system, there are golden nuggets of human beings who you can connect with that will be those advocates for you.
Absolutely. The thing that really kind of piqued me there that I was going to talk to was your second point, in that there is so much to do when you get out. And if you can use anything that the Army gives you, one of the things my wife told me very early on was, others have fought entire careers just to give you the opportunity to have that whatever, right? When we were canoeing, and I was talking about the fact that we can, you can get up to 52 massages a year if your docs are approving it along the way. Like, take it. It's there because others fought for your ability to have it. And Army guys, combat arms especially, were constantly taught, and throughout our whole careers, is look after the one that is the worst, right? Triage is key. Get to that guy, get him the hell out, do whatever you need to do, and get him okay. And then do yourself last. It's always yourself last. It's always everybody else, and then it's you.
It's like cleaning weapons, right? Like, section weapons all the way down, and if your pistol's clean, whoa, you had lots of time.
Yeah, you got more time than you could ever use in the Army. But it affects us after we're out, when we say, hey man, I'd really love to go get a massage right now, but then I got to go through the paperwork, and I got to talk to this person, that person. But it is 100% worth it. And I got really lucky when I left Meaford, because I was the only person releasing at the time, and there was one VA representative on base,
like VIP service.
Right, I just walked in the door, and she's like, "Oh, yeah, okay, you're releasing. Here's the paperwork. Fill this out. Fill this out. Sign. And I'm like, "What am I signing?" She's like, "We're applying for everything." And just throw it at the wall, see what sticks, right, and hope for the best.
Well, and that's exactly it. Put it out there. The worst thing that's going to happen is
Yep. And you're going to get it in an envelope. It's not even someone's going to tell you no. You're just going to go "Oh shit, I guess I don't get that." Move on.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I find, at least with my own experience, that if there's any questions about certain parts of the claims process and everything, you can reach out to them on the private messaging system in your VAC account. And, somebody always gets back to you in 48 hours. Always.
Yep.
So it's not bad.
Yeah, and I think it's really, I have a lot of friends that have difficulties getting through the VA bureaucracy,
Absolutely.
right? I'm sure you do too. I have a lot of people that have no problem getting through it as well. So, and I found a lot of it actually had to do with rank. And the funny thing that I found about that was you have to do more admin as you get higher up. So you're used to doing the paperwork and sending the emails and constantly checking the stuff and going back and talking to this person, asking that person, blah, blah, blah. Especially if you were in an ops position where you're doing that anyway, it's pretty simple. If you send the emails, you do the time, you take the initiative to drive that forward. And I found a lot of the privates and the corporals who didn't have to do that when they got out, or before they got out, have a hugely hard time pounding through that
and
paperwork.
they don't have a voice. I think that's like a big difference too, is that like the higher you move up the rank structure, the more your voice is paid attention to. So you have, you know, that experience moving forward. So, you know, a major advocating for himself with Veterans Affairs is going to be a lot different conversation than the majority of privates that have been used to, you know, you basically have to like, it's like going to kindergarten. You get your name duct taped onto you basically, and like you have to ask someone to go pee, and like all your like normal body movements that you like attend to as an adult, you now have to ask for permission for. So, you know, a private going out of their way to say like, hey, I'm having back issues and I think I might need massages. Like, how in the world do you even begin to advocate for yourself at that point? So,
not only that, you get it suppressed regularly, right? When you do have a voice and you say, oh, you know, my back kind of hurts, and that one warrant's like, I've been in the Army for 25 fucking years, my back is fine. You shut your mouth. And you're like, all right, cool, man. Like, all right, like it. So not only do the, you know, lower ranks not have a voice, it is actively suppressed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of the training process. And then on top of that,
well, and it's true though, right? Like there's a point where you have to go, okay, you know, push the pain aside, work, right? That's the whole point of the job. But once you're out of the job, you have to be able to say, hey, man, like one of my examples was when I got out, I got sent to the OSI clinic here at Edmonton. And I just went. No thought, no question to it. All right, yeah, that's where I got to go. And I sat and I worked with this doctor for about a year. And I got worse and worse and worse and worse over that year. And I realized after 6 months that I had to continually remind him that what my son's name was, even though I saw him every week and I talked about my son every session. And I was like, he's not really paying attention to me, but I kept going. And then I had a buddy of mine, finally, I was complaining about it. And he was like, you know, you could just see whoever you want. Right? Like, as long as they're covered by Blue Cross, you can just see. I'm like, I hadn't even thought of that before.
The Army gave this to me. That's just what I do. Yeah. And it's a bit of a misnomer, too, that in the military, you have the right to ask for a different care provider. Like, there is something that is absolutely critical in the doctor-patient relationship is like the therapeutic relationship or bedside manner in which like everybody interacts. So especially when you're dealing with mental health, if you can't connect with your care provider, it's not going to work. But, you know, people don't necessarily know that in the military you can be like, hey, this social worker we didn't connect. Can I try someone else? They'll just grind it out, and then you end up having a bad taste in your mouth about, you know, mental health services, and it kind of degrades down there. But we're not very good at being able to let people know that they can advocate for themselves in certain aspects of their care.
Absolutely. And, you know, this is why I think the peer support method works so well, is because you have people who know what we're actually talking about. We don't need to explain what a section attack is. We don't need to explain why we were doing a VPS or what, like, it was just, they have context. I had a whole conversation with the Pantoy podcast boys.
That was hilarious. I loved it.
Thank you. Was that you need context, right? The average civilian has no contextual grasp as to what we do. That's for a reason. They didn't do what we did. And the average psychologist who, you know, is doing a stint or 2 years or whatever on a base just to get their check marks so they can move on, they have no concept of what we do either, and we have to give them that context. But why peer support, I think, works so well is because that context is there, right? And we have it. And this leads into what I wanted to talk to you about through the whole podcast was, like, I think when people envision what peer support is, they think of like an AA meeting, right? People sitting around in a circle saying, hey, I'm Chance, I'm an alcoholic, that kind of thing, and then just sharing stories. But there's so much more to it. So as someone who is actively studying this, what is peer support?
That is an excellent question. So I was pondering it, and I'm like, how does one actually explain it? And like, I didn't want to be like, Webster's Dictionary describes peer support as like that. Like, we're not doing that. So peer support, I think, is, it's the gray space between the formal and the informal supports that exists. And I think what you were talking about before is something that I lean into, which is organic cultural competency, and where, there is this base layer of mutual understanding between all parties, whether it's the individuals providing the service or the ones that are receiving the service. There's like this base language that everybody understands. And that is not something that you can achieve through PowerPoint or watching a video or reading a book. This is something that is only going to develop through your own experience. And that, I think, is where, the step off point is for that. And, peer support is within itself. There are formal peer support systems and informal peer support systems. So it depends. Like AA is a more formal peer support system. They've got a structure, things like that. But informal can also be kind of what we were talking about before the show, when you were just chatting with your friends and you had these deep conversations. And interestingly enough, there was a study that was done in the 1960s about therapeutic conversations, and it was based off research that individuals had done about the conversations that soldiers were having with each other when they were coming back from war. So, however many days or weeks they were sitting on those ships coming all the way back to Canada, conversations are what were being had. And, there is some evidence to show that those conversations may have been supportive to individuals in the terms of like post-traumatic stress disorder, which they didn't really understand at that point. But it was that organic, naturally occurring conversations between those that have mutual experiences that are highly beneficial. And, now today research shows that there are group therapies that far surpass the ability for some people to do individual therapy. And I mean, it's obviously very much individualized. Different therapies don't work for everybody, but there is something intangible in peer support, and it either happens or it doesn't. And I think the organizations that strive to provide it on a more formal basis are just shaping the relationship. That's all they're doing. They're providing a location, they're providing a topic, they're providing individuals who may be more qualified in that area or not. But they're just taking that conversation that was happening on the boat in World War II on the way home, and they're shaping it and making it a little bit more formal. So, maybe not the Webster's Dictionary, but that's Whitney's opinion on what peer support is.
No, I think that's really, it's really valid in the fact that, especially like, I'm sure you've read On Combat by Dave Grossman.
Yeah, it's literally one of my textbooks for my course.
So I got to read that while I was in Afghanistan, and it was like super helpful because there were days I'd come back from a firefight and somebody was like, "Dude, did you see that RPG fly overhead?" And I'm like,
"What?
No, like, no. When did that happen?" And then I was reading, actually, in that chapter was talking about auditory and visual exclusion, and I was just like, "Oh, that's probably why I didn't see it." Right? So it helped me manage those symptoms really quickly because it just read it. But in that book, he talks about, the medieval warfare where you would have these really intimate battles where you are literally ripping people apart. And then you'd go at the end of the night when you can't fight at nighttime, and you'd sit around the fire and there'd be that grizzled old sergeant who's just sitting there, and the young brand new dude is like, "Man, I saw this dude's heads explode." And he's like, "Yeah, that happens." Right? Like, it just, that immediate connection of whatever you're feeling is normal. We've all been there. You're good to go. And having that that gray area in between the formalized and the non-formalized of just support is so key.
It's absolutely critical. And I was like, how do I make an analogy about it? I was thinking about it like it's like, picking a book. You walk through and it's like 10 people can read the same book. 5 people love it and 4 people are like, what in the world? One person's just like, I didn't even read it. Right? Like, and that's what peer support groups are. Like, they can all be providing the same service, but they just don't connect. And I think that is probably, a message that needs to be, a little bolder in the community, is that you might have to try a few. And that's normal. Like, you don't have to go to that same group just because it's there, because that's what we're used to doing in the military. You have the ability to try it out. And, I've had individuals that like blew my mind, the support groups that they ended up working with. Like, I had an individual, I can't even remember it. The people who do like speaking, like public speaking in like church basements and stuff. He ended up working with them. I would never have pegged that in a million years. But it
that's like the speech people. I can't remember. I can't remember the name, but I hear what you're saying. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah,
it'll come up like 20 minutes into the podcast. We'll be like, there it is.
There it is.
There, but like they're all unique, and so are we. So if you can be patient with yourself in the process, which is like a daily struggle for me, to be able to like allow yourself the time to pick one that works or doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, and this is one of the benefits of understanding your own boundaries, right? Like I'm a big proponent of equine therapy. I grew up around animals, grew up around horses, grew up around cattle. Like it makes sense to me that to work with horses, that it clicked, and I saw huge leaps in my own recovery just from working around horses. But I also know dudes that are allergic to horses. Or that are scared of horses, or that are, like absolutely phobic of it and will never go near one. And I'm like, okay, well,
to the trauma, like
exactly, yeah, like, oh, you're scared of horses? Let's go near this 1,600-pound animal and like, let's have fun. But it comes down to, actually recognizing your own boundaries and going, oh, you know what? I don't like. You could go to a group chat and be like, you know what? I don't want to sit around and listen to people bitch. Okay, fine. But then you go to the same group and you can do like one of the op vet build things where they build models.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And there's not a lot of chatting, but there's some, and that might work for you. But that's part of you advocating for yourself, as we were saying earlier, right? And creating boundaries and saying, you know what? I need to find something, but this isn't working. And then going from there. Do you have any tips on somebody that is having trouble managing those boundaries? Ooh. Or advocating for themselves?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because like I don't shy down from a fight. Anybody who's worked with me, like I'm gung ho, especially in
what? No.
Like advocacy, like I struggle with people who can't access resources for whatever the challenge is, or any of that kind of stuff. So for me, when I have the uniform on, like I'm gone, I can do it. But you turn that on yourself, and it's just as challenging. And I have all the skills and I had all of the knowledge, and even I struggle. So I think that the big one is normalization, and that there is no part of this process that really is easy. And I think sometimes people are a little naive going into the process, and like it'll be fine. And there's better transitions and worse transitions, and then different levels in between. But transitioning is hard regardless. And if you can be patient with yourself in those challenges and know that you are not the only person going through those challenges, that helps. And I think that brings to a really important part of peer support is connectedness as human beings. So like you mentioned the models, right? Like you don't have to be verbally communicating with someone to connect. It could just be a bunch of people sitting around a table building little Bismarcks and stuff. And like,
Yep.
there's a connectedness there, because there'll be some, you know, in the veteran community, there will be some that like they want to go out and talk. And then there's the others that they want to step to the background and they just want to be present. And I think if you can allow yourself the patience to figure out which one of those you are. And the other thing is trust your gut. If there's something that's giving you like the EBGBs and like it's just like you're walking away and you're not feeling good, don't do it. No sergeant major is making you do it. You can choose. You have that option, and your gut is you. So like even even though someone's gut might say like that program doesn't work and like it rocked my world, don't compare. Don't compare, because we have different life experiences, we have different challenges, we have different goals. And it just didn't work for you, but it worked for me. And probably the flip side would be things that worked for them would not, you know, be something I'm interested in either.
Well, this is the basis of, you know, you can't compare trauma, right? You two people could be in the same firefight in the same position and they will experience it completely differently. So if you can't compare trauma, why would you compare recovery?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And your recovery might take 10 years, mine might take 10 months. So what? That it doesn't matter. It's about moving forward. You know, I say this on my podcast all the time. I say it in social media all the time, is that like, you just have to begin. And there's a line in The Martian, you know, the movie with Matt Damon, and it's in the book, I think, too. And it's right at the end where he's like, you know, I made potatoes with my own shit and all this other stuff. And then he goes, you know what, the real thing is space doesn't, it doesn't cooperate. So you just have to solve one problem and then solve the next and then solve the next. And you just begin. And that's how it starts. And when I tell anybody that's having a hard time, it's just like, what is the first thing you need to do? What is the one thing you need to do today? Do it. Doesn't work? Okay, try tomorrow. Right? Pound that into you. And that's one of the challenges, is dealing with those either failures, which is super challenging, especially for the combat arms. I use the combat arms specifically because that's what I know.
Absolutely. The spoon vernacular.
I can't. Yeah, so I can't say that, you know, working in supply is not as difficult as this, or transitioning from supply is not as difficult as this, because I just don't know. But for my experience in dealing with other combat arms people, failure is horrifying, and it is demoralizing, and it depressing, and you will beat the living shit out of yourself.
Failure equals punishment in the military.
Exactly. Yes. Or death. Right? Like that. You know, well, I just recorded something that I'm going to be releasing a little while about a minefield, and there's ways through a minefield. There's safe ways, there's not safe ways, and there's ways to make yourself dead real fast. And the thing is, if you make a mistake, either you die or somebody else dies. And so we live in this world of huge consequences. And when you're out and you're like, well, I didn't get that paperwork in, you know what happens? Fucking nothing.
Absolutely. I actually like using the word correction in like post-military, because, you know, failure is such a term that we associate with a lot of our military experiences that are not positive. So on the, you know, the transition side, if something doesn't go the way you thought that it was, I don't see it as a failure. I see it as a correction. Because you think about like correction in a drill, correction on like how are you using a weapon. Like nobody's just like, oh gosh, my world is over. It's just like, oh, okay, I have to move this. That's about it. And so it's just that. It's like having bumpers in a bowling alley, right? Like it's just like, I tried, boof, nope, that one didn't work. That one just bumped me back. That all it is. It's just slight corrections as you like move on course, and they're good. Like they actually have positive messaging to you, because you can understand what didn't work. You're like, oh, well, I don't need to waste my time on that. Like there's no what ifs. It's just that one didn't work, and I can move on to the next step. So it's, you know, it's a positive aspect to it, and you know, you can just flip the way we think about it. I find it beneficial, but terminology is super important because it's, very triggering for individuals because we associate certain words with certain things.
Absolutely. I mean, we talked about this on the canoe trip. We were sitting around the fire, and I was stating that, like, when I talk to airborne guys, I use airborne vernacular. When I talk to engineers, I use engineer vernacular because those words are so trained into us. And I know that if sitting around a bunch of vets, even the police officers and the paramedics and stuff like that, if I were just to stand up and yell "stand to," I think every single one of us would just like what? What's that? Oh, right,
everybody's
okay, never mind.
Just like,
right? Yeah, like what's happening? But it's because of those words, because they're so drilled into us. It becomes so. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And like the vernacular is key. And you made me think of when I was an instructor. I don't know how many times I heard this on my PLQ, right? Don't say sorry, correct yourself and move on. So if you make a mistake or you fumble your words or whatever, and you just stop, correction, and you move on. It's exactly the same thing, right? You're making the correction, mistakes happen, whatever, push on, right? I think that's fantastic. But one of the other challenges, I found from being in advocacy and working with other people is the success part of it, right? When you see people succeeding, it can be demoralizing when you're not at that point.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're watching somebody else get farther than you are and you're like, fuck, why am I not so blah, 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 blah. And it can be really difficult. So when you're talking peer support and when you're dealing with large groups of people, I have this meme that I made years ago, and it's a dude climbing up a mountain, and he's like, almost there, and then you can see the peak, and he's like, almost there, and he gets over the peak, and it's just a false peak, and he's got a whole nother mountain, and he's just
around the corner, guys.
Exactly right.
Is it?
And the original meme was like, fuck, and he put his head down, and then I changed it to good, and I was like, that, and I started using that vernacular. I mean, I'm wearing my good shirt right now.
Nice.
But
I wore my peer support shirt. Be a good human.
Which is very good. That's awesome. How simple is that? It's not that hard, but it apparently is really difficult for some people. But I started to look at the next challenge, like completing the one as I took a second. Yay, good, awesome. Okay, now to the next one. So what would you, when people are having issues with success or people who have succeeded in a moment and then have stopped, how do you get them rolling again? How do you get them pushing forward?
That's a good question. I'm a big advocate of understanding like the underlying, not justification, but like reason why we think the way we think or why we do the things that we do. So in the military, we are ranked against each other from day one. Like there's a top candidate and a bottom candidate, and like every week you're in the top, middle, or bottom third. Like you're always competing against each other, whether intentionally or unintentionally, or someone is like ranking you. So it's incredibly challenging for people, like especially veterans, when they are transitioning and they see other veterans that are doing really, really well, or maybe worse, and then they feel better. It's ingrained inside of us. So if you can come to a base understanding of like that's where it starts, that's where it stems from, then you can move to a bigger understanding of why that's not necessary anymore. Like you're not getting PERs, you're not having to fight for master corporals. There's like none of that is happening. So enjoy the successes if you can, because that was all you. You did that success. And, I don't know if it comes with age or with like parenthood, but you start kind of looking at things a little bit differently where, the end of the world things are kind of no longer end of the world. And that comes with time. So it kind of leads back to what we were talking before about like patience and being kind to yourself and understanding the process. But, I think we talked about it when we were on the canoe trip about a concept called the highlight reel. And I'm a huge advocate of that because it's the complete opposite of everything you do in the military. So a highlight reel is basically like, if you think of a highlight reel, like a trailer from a movie, there's this, it's all the good parts. And then there's some movies you don't even need to watch because the trailer just had the good parts. So like nobody's going to put out a trailer of like the worst, most boring parts of a movie. It's never going to happen because nobody watches it. But we watch
bunch of dudes sitting in chairs staring at each other.
But we watch ours all the time. Nobody watches their own highlight reel of like when they just totally crushed something. So like, that's a technique I try and use with soldiers as they're either like moving through that process or they're kind of stuck in a bit of it, and be like, let's go back and think about, or you can take some time to think about, give me just 1 minute where like in your career you were a rock star. And it could have been just like the most recent success, or it could have been something. And then it kind of changes how your brain is moving itself through challenges, because you can remember, be like, oh, yeah, wait a minute. There were some times where I was pretty badass. And that's an okay thing. Like, you can give yourself permission to be like, I was good at that, or that felt really good. It's okay. And if you can kind of see those moments and remind yourself of them, they're incredibly helpful. And I mean, I think I talked to you guys about a Bravo Zulu folder. So I have a literal BZ folder in both my civilian and my work emails. And about 10 years ago, when I really started getting into this stuff, I would I had to fight myself mentally on it to like drag an email where somebody gave me a compliment. And then I just like,
what is that? A compliment?
Just, drag it over. But then I started getting like more comfortable with the fact where I'd have like a crap meeting or a crap interaction. And then I'd like go back to my folder and read it out and be like, oh yeah, okay. All right. And, like sometimes it takes 2 minutes, sometimes it takes 2 hours, sometimes it takes 2 days. But the more you become accustomed to it, the easier it becomes. And like, now it takes me 5 minutes for certain things that would have taken me days years ago. So, it's part of the learning process.
Absolutely. I actually just recently did this, and I don't actually have a folder for it, but I've struggled with for years of giving myself the credit for doing something. So we're 98% finished doing my basement, like renovating my basement. And when we bought the place, it was a completely unfinished basement, concrete floors, 2x4s around the walls. That was it. And I have.
Are you in it right now?
Yeah, I'm in it right now. Yeah. And that's I did all the electrical. I did all the framing. I did all the drywall. I did all the painting. I mean, I had people come in and help periodically, but 90% of the work I've done myself. And I've at no point up until a little bit of maybe like I think 3 or 4. It was actually I think right when I got back from Warrior Adventure Canada trip. When I was sitting there, I was just kind of like staring at the walls, and I'm like, I built this.
Yeah.
And this is pretty awesome. Like, I laid the carpet. I laid I did it with my own 2 feet, with my own 2 hands, and then actually weeks ago, before we went to the trip, I was going through a bunch of old file folders, and we were, as the office is now done, we were putting everything away, and I found my old UER with my PDRs and stuff in it, and I was like reading some of them, and they were great. Lots of them things were like, Sapper Burles leads the charge. Didn't think PT was hard enough, so he came up with his own PT plan, right? Just little stuff like that, and I was just like, that makes me feel good, because I remember leaving that unit being a really angry, bitter corporal.
Yeah.
and so it was nice to have those little folders, and you're right. Finding those successes and then actually accepting, saying, yes, I did good is super important. And it actually helped me when I started getting involved into advocacy years ago. I was waiting for this paragon to show up from the hill, right? And just be like, some tier 1 operator is going to come down and be like, all right, like General Lowe is going to come down and he's going to retire and be like, all right, boys, this is the way forward. Everybody follow me. And I think it was like a year or so in, and I was like, I don't think anybody's coming, man. And I had to take it upon myself. And I was like, well, I guess if nobody else is doing this, I'll start. And if somebody better comes along the way, fucking cool. Let them take over. Like, we'll keep pushing forward. And I think this is the key point, at least in my head, was you have to lead your own path. You have to lead the way. And if others follow you, awesome. If not, cool. Like, you're still leading the charge for yourself. And if nobody else shows up to do it better, then obviously you're doing a good job.
Okay, I don't know if you saw me there. I wrote 2 things down because you triggered me, and then of course, obviously PTSD brain, it could be gone in 20 seconds.
Oh,
so,
for sure.
The first one is there's a video on YouTube somewhere out in the internet world, but basically there's a rock concert somewhere where people are obviously doing a lot of things and have probably consumed a lot of substances.
Perhaps, maybe.
Never at a music concert. So there's this chick that just kind of gets up from her picnic blanket and she's just dancing on the hill. Not good, just dancing. And she's going and going and going. And then somebody else is like, you know what? I want to dance like that too. And then they get up and dance. And then within minutes, there's hundreds of people there. And I've really kind of likened the leading of peer support to that, because a lot of people, when you start peer support programming or you're involved in that process, they're oh, it's amazing and you've done so much, and be like, I was kind of just the crazy person who stood up and started dancing. And everybody else who started dancing did the work. And that's that's how it goes, and it's organic. So the second point that I wrote down there was, when I was working with the Special Forces unit in Petawawa, I was married at the time, and I was single coming in and then became married. So I was a single person for a bunch of the years I was there, and then I was a service spouse. And I saw the experience from a completely different perspective. And at the time, the CAF was ramping down in Afghanistan, but, CANSOFCOM was still deploying. And there ended up being a significant gap in services when you have, a Special Forces base that's on a regular force base. There's always competition for resources. So I saw that there was this gap, and mostly because I started experiencing myself. It's not that it wasn't there before. It was now in my world. And then because I never shy down from a fight, I became the person in the back of the O group that was so about resources. And this one went on for a couple of months. And then, we got a new, I think it was a DCO, lovely, lovely guy. And it was our, first O group, and the hand was going up, except he was new and he didn't know about the hand. And he just looked at me. He was like, well, Sergeant Young, you're a senior NCO. You can make changes. I remember going back to my office. I was like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And then I was like, what have I done? So it started as a conversation in my kitchen with 2 other fabulous women. And, we started talking kind of about the conversation you and I were having before, and it was organic. But there were a lot of components to, standing up peer support organizations that, you have to factor in. And one of the big ones, I think, is that there has to be credibility, authenticity, and accessibility. And if you're not aware of that and cognizant of it in your planning process, it can really debilitate the good that you're trying to do. So, we spent a lot of time getting buy-in, because, buying in military people, let alone people in that organization, is a challenge. And if you don't have buy-in and it doesn't work, what you do?
Military people and special forces guys are resistant to change?
Never.
No.
I know, right? I love how, like, in the infantry, it's like adapt and overcome. Be like, don't you just...
But do we really have to?
You can't? I kind of thought that out. But, so we spent, like, a ton of time, and, we had to get the guys' buy-in, and it had to work. So it was organic. And it started as a challenge, and I surrounded myself with some individuals that danced more crazy than I did, and we ended up presenting it to the chain of command as a formal part of the process. And what the end result was a peer support organization called the Family Wellness Network, and we operated in the gray space between the formal and the informal supports. And it was fantastic because it was organic. So everything was authentic, which was fantastic. And, special forces guys don't typically tend to marry women that are not driven. So I was surrounded by these, like, brilliant women that were more than willing to jump in. But more importantly, the men in uniform were just as eager, because they know the importance of being supported, especially when you're in deployments and when you're, basically in the military. So it kind of just, it flew, and it got bigger than I could have ever imagined. And I remember being challenged again about something about, like, balls or things like regimental balls. I was like, well, you should get the Family Wellness Network to have, like, some input in that. And then they're like, you know what, Sergeant Young, that's a great idea. You guys should run the ball. And I was like,
wait a second, what?
And I remember going home and just being like, what have I done? Like, what have I done? And I went to, who now ends up being my closest friend. I showed up on her doorstep, and I was like, I've made a very big mistake, and I'm over my head. And she jumped on, and it went from there. So it was, very, very demonstrative of how an organic thing just goes. And it demonstrates the requirement for that support. And I think that is an important factor when dealing with peer supports as well, is that, like, if you're involved in a peer support organization and it kind of filters out, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It might be that the service is not necessarily required, or even better, it's not required because that issue no longer exists, which is fantastic, right? For, like, a peer support organization to work themselves out of a job. It's just fantastic. Unfortunately, I think with the things we're exposed to in the military, peer support is critical in every element. And I mean, if a girl could dream, like, I'd put peer support organizations, like, right into BMQ and, like, all the way up. And maybe that'll happen, but.
I was just having a conversation with my massage therapist earlier about, so she's like her own contractor, but she also works for Team Canada and works on, like, track and swim teams and all these things. And the athletes for each group have, like, actual wellness teams. They have psychologists there, they have massage therapists there, they have chiropractors there, acupuncturists there. They have, like, so whatever you need as a Team Canada athlete, it's there for you in terms of support. And I was saying that it kind of blows me away that we don't have something like that in units, because one PCLI or friggin', the RCR, the engineers, the tankers, if they had an actual, like, in-house massage therapist, chiropractor, acupuncturist, and psychologist, you would see massive declines in issues.
Oh, for sure. I would personally like to see that memo for in-house massage therapists go up the chain. Like, I'd love to read the minutes on that one.
Right? That'd be fantastic. You have random colonels being like, yeah. But that's what it comes down to, is that what you need to do is, as you did, be the change you want to see, right? Like that is your, if you want something to change, you have to be that person that says, okay, you know what? I don't like this. I'm going to change it. And then, when I was instructing, we did a BMOQ land, the phase 2 for the officers. And we started doing like, counter IED training, just basic, they called it ETHAR. It was not ETHAR. ETHAR is explosive threat hazard awareness and recognition. And it's something taught by the engineers. It is super boring and sucks balls.
Super catchy name.
But I started teaching.
Super catchy.
Super catchy name, yeah. This is why we need acronyms in the Army, right? So we were teaching this class, and I'm like, this is all counter IED stuff. It's 5s and 20s. It's the basics of IED awareness. There was nothing on mines. There was nothing on unexploded ordnance. There was nothing on bombs. There was none of it. And I was like, this is not
right.
acceptable. Like I can't just leave a bunch of these troops with no concept of what a UXO is. And so I took up my chain of command. I was like, hey man, like this ETHAR program is not an ETHAR program. And normally ETHAR is spent, like I have 3 days to just do
I was going to say, I
ETHAR.
thought it was a couple of days when I did it.
Yeah. And, it's dry and it kind of sucks because you're sitting there staring at pictures. And I had this one example. I was at 408 Squadron, and this captain raised their hand, and she's like, I fly helicopters. What do I need to know about landmines? And I'm like, well, I'm glad you asked that, ma'am. And I flipped the slide, and it was a Russian anti-helicopter mine. I was like, so
the ground at some point? Like,
that's also yeah. Yeah, it does. It actually does land at times, too, and can touch the ground that could have Anyway, I went into this whole thing with her, and it turned into a really great learning point, but it was perfectly timed because the next slide was the anti-helicopter mine. And I was just like, this one's set up by radar, or set off by radar, and it's basically a giant claymore that shoots ball bearings into the sky at helicopters. Anyway, so I went through this. I'm like, this 3 days, how do I compress it? And they're like, well, I mean, if you can figure out a way, do it. You have like this block of time. So I spent some time and I pounded it out and built a program that had the basics of UXOs and IEDs and mines and the basics, right? We went outside for an hour and did some prodding. It was just basic training, right? And I passed it up the chain of command. It came back down. They said, yeah, it's approved. And about a week later, I was teaching another course, and I was actually doing the prodding thing with them. And my captain came out, and he was like, hey, Master Corporal Burles, just so you know, the 4 CANDIV has accepted this and is now installing it into all training SQs and BMOQ lands. So that's going to be their new ETHAR program throughout the whole thing. And then I heard like a little bit later, they're like, yeah, basically, I can't remember. Is it 2 CANDIV? Is all East Coast? I can't remember. It's been so many years. Anyway, basically the east side of Canada just accepted it. And they're like, this is now our training program for ETHAR. And I was just like, groovy. Like, I'm glad it's better than what it was. But that's, I saw an issue. Well, yeah, I saw the issue, right? I didn't like it. As an engineer, I was looking at it. This is not effective. I need to change it. And then I went up to chain of command said, yeah, man, do it. And I did it, and it changed things. And I think we don't see that often enough as young soldiers to want to push that initiative. And that initiative is a point on our PER.
And there's the irony in that is just like, it's mind blowing when you think about it, because when you join the military, you are no longer an individual, like at all. Like you literally have the same pair of socks in the same part of your, well, in my time it was your butt pack, but everybody's got their shit in the same spot. The only thing that differentiates you between the person standing next to you is your name tape. That's it. Like right down to like your bootlaces are exactly the same, or they should be. I still tie my boots the same way too. It's just habit.
Well, you've been in for 20 years, but still.
Just like still laced that way, so I just never take them undone. But oh no, I lost my train of thought.
Oh,
No,
sorry about that.
okay.
We were talking about leading the charge, being the change you want to see. I had changed stuff for young recruits.
Yeah. So for like the youngin, so like, and I think if I go a little further than that, is that it's outside the box. That's what I was thinking. Get back to me. So we're individuals, and if you make you toe dip into the pool and demonstrate that you are not an individual, you are punished for that. And so, we are no longer an army where we are blowing whistles and people are going up and over the top. We are really no longer a military that has a division between non-commissioned members and officers based on education. It's so melded these days. Everybody is everything. And so, when you have a system that's designed to punish or correct individuals who go outside the box without acknowledging the fact that there are individuals that when they think outside the box can really positively reshape some of the challenges that the institution is having. And that's, a huge point for people because, outside the box thinking is, what people pay millions of dollars for in the private sector and, in the military, it's just,
No.
in the box.
Rein it back in there, buddy. Yeah,
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And that makes it hard, on the outside. And then, you layer on the rank structure on top of that, where, you might have a private who's got, a master's degree in blah, 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 and just wants to come out and serve and as, join the combat engineers or somebody who was already trained as an engineer on the civilian side and they come in, they might know something and we don't really have a system in place for someone to be like, that's not working.
How many times did we hear, whatever it is, ask a question, there's no stupid questions. And you know what? Anybody that's been around an infantry platoon anywhere,
there are stupid questions.
There are stupid questions. Yeah,
there are stupid questions that result in significant punishment well after you've said it.
Oh yes, and the funny thing is though is that all it takes is one good leader to go, why is that kid asking that question?
Absolutely.
And then just pulling at that thread, like, okay, well, we were doing a. I can't remember. Oh, right. We had somebody from the Hill come down and teach us Fibula, doing room clearance stuff. Right? And we were like, friggin' sweet. Like, this is going to be wicked. Bunch of engineers getting to go and actually do room clearances. And room clearance is friggin' amazing. That is the highest intensity thing you can do. So much fun.
It's like 4D.
Add explosives into that, and you're like that is the ultimate dream. Anyway, we were sitting in class and we were doing the whole PowerPoint. Okay, this is how you do presentation. This is when you come around the corner. You want to be square, blah, blah, blah. If the dude takes a round, push him out of the way, carry on to the room, all these things, right? And one of the guys put his hand up and he's like, so what happens if you get shot in the face? And it honestly, to his credit, the instructor took a second. And he was like,
you don't really have a choice at that point.
You push him off to the side again, like you just kind of push him off and you carry on. But the thing that I took out of that years later was the fact that what made him ask that question? What was it that actually made him go, I'm not getting enough specifics in this particular environment. What is it that I need to know? And we found out later after we actually sat down and did like a round table on it, was the fact that he was trying to figure out, based on trajectory, how the person falls. If it's easier to pull him out of the room or if it's push him into the room. And so we were like, okay, that makes more sense in terms of that question. Yes. But in the moment, we were all like, what fuck kind of question is that? Dude, get shot in the face. He's dead. Move him out of the way. Let's carry on. Yeah. But, one good leader to go, there's more here. What is it? We got to figure it out. And then
it's interesting that you said that because I'm having a parenthood moment, which can totally be translated into leadership. Because really combat arms were just big groups of children. So you just parenting
Yeah,
them.
absolutely. And you have to manage them like a group of children.
Like,
Everybody hold hands and walk down the street.
you know those wagons that like daycare providers have that have like all the connected cabooses, like each section's just got one going down, like.
Yep.
But like what I was thinking is that I read an article that really stuck with me years ago before I was even a mom, and it was talking about like parents that are super frustrated with their kids because like they dilly-dally and like they do their own thing and they're just like stand and stare at the sky and you're just like, oh my goodness. And she had written it from the perspective where, you know, when she was on a walk with her kid and she was like, we gotta get places, like, and he was just standing there like looking at the ground. And she comes over and instead of being like, all right, buddy, like we gotta go, it was like, well, like, what are you doing? But genuinely interested. And it turns out, I guess he was like super curious because there were a bunch of ants that were moving like in a line. And I've had that experience with my daughter where I've caught her and she's just like standing up, but it's because she's seen a bird. And then, you know, we can go and have a dialogue outside of that. But that's, you know, perspective. And I think that that can be applied in leadership as well, is that, you know, we all joke about that, you know, the institution is just like the softest machine, right? Like you come in and then you get pushed out the other end. So like we're all replaceable. But anytime somebody brings, you know, a question about doctrine or policy or why we do things, you know, the hand goes up. I don't know why the institution as a culture takes that as like a personal offense. Like it's not against you. The world has changed. You know, if we taught the same tactics in battle school that in 1910 that we do now, like we would not be very effective. So, you know, things change. And I mean, you know, if you tie peer support so closely to mental health, World War I, PTSD was a character flaw. And 2021, we understand that not only is that absolutely not the case, there are predetermined factors, there are risk categories, there are genetics and biological, and there's all these pieces. So, you know, we have to be willing to change and, you know, not to be like, the children are the future, like the privates are our future, but like, there's a private out there right now that is going to be in CDS.
Yep.
It's going to be out there. And, you know, who his corporal and master corporal and all of those people moving him through his developmental process, or her, I take that back, their developmental process, that's going to shape what the CDS looks like in 20, 30 years. And that's where I think leading change has to come in. So, like, I mean, I've been in for 20 years. I joined not very long after women were allowed in the combat arms. And experiences were very different then than they are now. And the way they are now are definitely more positive than the way they were back then. But that's because things changed. And you know, you have to be willing to literally adapt and overcome. It's almost written into our doctrine, right?
I think I've heard that somewhere before.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's where I think, you know, one of the biggest challenges in the institution is.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, I think what it comes down to is we don't develop humility. And I think a lot of it comes from the fact that we're constantly set against each other, right? So you're trying to be better than the other guy without realizing that the actual struggle is being better than yourself, right? It doesn't matter that guy can run a 6-minute mile, right? It doesn't matter. What can I run? I can run a 7-minute mile. Okay, cool. Can I run a 6:59 tomorrow, right? Can I leave the army a little bit better than when I got there? And I mean, it's sad that there is there's a stereotype of the salty corporal, right? The guy that's been there, he's a corporal, he's pissed off, he hates the army, but he never leaves.
That works in the kit shop.
You know, he works in the kit shop, or he's in the canteen, or he like, he's constantly seen by everybody, and he hates the world. And I was that guy for a little while. And it wasn't until I recognized that I was putting myself in those positions, but I needed the humility to actually say, oh, right, it is me. It's not the sergeant major that hates me, even though that guy and I had a falling out. As a salty corporal, or like if I was a master corporal or a sergeant and I looked at this corporal who just hates life, why would I send him on course? Right? He makes me look bad. He makes the unit look bad. He makes everyone look bad. I'm not going to send him on a friggin' what did I ask for? I asked for a master breacher course down in the States that's run through like Blackwater and stuff. Like,
no, you're not going.
Yeah, you're not going. Like, I get it now. At the time I was like, well, fuck you, man. I put all the work in to get this, but now I'm not getting anything out of it. And I realized that was me. It wasn't the sergeant major that hated me. It wasn't this guy that, you know, I had issues with. It was me. And the humility to actually understand that came years later. It was actually probably maybe a year or two ago when I actually finally I was the root of all my problems.
That's so hard too, because, you know, I find that as I'm moving out of the tail end of my transition, and I mean, I know I've got chapters to go, that's really where there's a lot of self-awareness and recognition that comes if you do the work, right? Like if you're willing to do the work. And, you know, you can take a look back over your past experiences and you have those moments like, that was not maybe the greatest of choices. But I think, you know, if in peer support, there isn't this requirement for humility because it just comes naturally for the most part. You know, there's obviously going to be individuals when you first come in, you're going to be guarded. But that humility is just open most of the time because people who are willing to volunteer as peer supporters are people that are super open with being normalizing the experience. So humility doesn't really have to be there. And I think that's, or it doesn't have to be taught. It just comes organically. So what's interesting I find about that is that those groups are incredibly cohesive and there's so much positive that comes out of it. And they function in a way that you can't teach. So if we had the capacity to integrate that into our institution so that you had a group of soldiers that were so cohesive and so communicative to each other, could you possibly imagine how tactically potent we could be? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I did not, you know, if you don't jump out of aircrafts in the military, are you really doing it? Goodness, it's a terrible experience. But, you know, we pit ourselves against that and we put that up on a pedestal as something that you have to do. So if you do it, it's cool and it's super badass. And nobody talks about the fact that almost every single person on the plane on the way up is I'm gonna shit myself right now. I'm gonna poop myself right now. And your hands are sweating. And that's actually a term in on combat. It's called a battle shit, and it's part of the physiological process for a stress response because you're going to jump out of an aircraft with a significant amount of weight on you. So this is a normal reaction. We laugh, but this is a normal reaction. You know, you see the old guys that just that's all they do. You're I'm on my 7,000th jump. You're I don't know if that's safe in your brain, but you know, nobody talks about it. And when I went to Petawawa, and that was the first time that I actually started having conversations with my peers where people were I fucking hate it. I hate it so much. And I was really? No, wouldn't it be so awesome to know, as you're hanging onto the static line that, all the sheep that are with you are experiencing the exact same thing? Wow. Wouldn't that make the experience completely different?
I never got the opportunity to jump. I wanted to be a jumper for many years.
Your back
I still would like to jump at some point. Oh, my back is already trashed, and it would be
that's true.
I would come in like a fucking lawn dart too, right? Like I'm 220 plus another 100-pound worth of ruck, and like I, there'd be no. I don't care how my legs and my feet and knees together. I'm going 3 feet into the ground, just thunk, and that's gonna be it. But I also realized, this is all the other thing that I was going to talk about earlier, and I forgot. But we all do this regularly. As an engineer, I look at the infantry guys and I'm like, you guys are fucking nuts, right? And I hear a story about, oh yeah, so I was like doing this patrol and then we got shot at and then I ran through open ground and then I'm like, are you fucking insane? Like, are you insane? And then that's horrible, right? And then I'll be telling a story about something. I'll be like, yeah, so I pulled the C4 out of my backpack and then I pulled the det cord out of my leg pocket and then I took my smoke pack out and took the det out and stuck it in and then put it beside the bomb and then pulled the smoke and I ran off. And they're like, Are you what? You did what? And it's nothing for me. Like, whatever. You talk to the armored guys, you talk to the artillery, FUFACs, they're doing, like, every one of us look at each other and going like, are you insane?
But I need you.
But absolutely. And it's the fact that it's normalized. Yeah. Right? As the infantry, it's expected that you want to be a jumper. You want to be, in the engineers, it's expected that you want to be a diver. I never wanted to be a diver. No desire to do that. It's a nasty way to go down if you have to go down. But that's the expectation.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? And so for us, when it comes to explosives, for us, we're like, whatever, yeah, sure, let's throw some charges on that and we'll do whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I remember I was talking to a civilian guy that does demolitions, and I was like, yeah, so I had my dets and my smoke pack in my arm, and he's like, are you insane? Like, why would you do that? I'm like, I separated them by cigarettes, right? Like, what, you're going to carry around a steel tin like this with them all separated? Like, but it's normalized for us, and you're right. If you were sitting in the plane and it was normal, everyone was sitting there going like, you may be experiencing panic right now. It's okay. Breathe.
And then even if you go like a step forward, be like, we recognize that there could be stress responses. This is how you can mitigate them.
Exactly.
Like, that would be fantastic. Yep. You said something there that I think really links back to peer support too, in that, everybody does their crazy shit, right? Like, what, you ran across where? You did what?
Yeah.
And civilians don't understand that because they can't have that same experience. And just like, maybe like I wouldn't be super comfortable carrying C4 the way you carry C4, but like that's your experience. And even though that there are traumas, right? Like there are going to be like, if you can't really be in the middle of a tick, and a lot of stuff go down and not expect that there is an exposure to trauma. Mm-hmm. But in that trauma, so like let's take that memory of, let's say, a tick, right? And there is exposure to trauma. There's a negative aspect to that, but soldiers understand that there are some super positive memories that come from the exact same experience. And just like we can't understand why like the different combat arms and different trades do what they do, because like that's just fucked. We have to be able to have that cultural competency and that mutual understanding where you can have a conversation with someone about a traumatic experience where there were times where you were happy, excited, more cohesive with a group of soldiers than can ever truly be put into words. And then, like maybe there was some shit that went down where like you performed like a rock star, right? Like there are very positive experiences and very positive emotions that are attached to traumatic experiences for soldiers in combat or not even in combat, like in any traumatic experience. And that you can't explain. So that peer support is where that is allowed to occur and is a further ability to normalize those experiences. Because, integrating back into a civilian population is really hard. Like, let alone like you got to drop the F-bombs, but like you got to stop talking in acronyms. And, if that in itself is a challenge, let alone trying to understand or relate to somebody who cannot understand why you would carry C4 in your pocket like that.
Yeah. And think that was awesome.
Right?
Like,
right?
I loved having C4 in my pocket. That was awesome.
And that is, one of the biggest hurdles for people to get over is that, you have these negative experiences that are directly tied with positive, life-changing experiences, and only people who have been through that can really connect.
Yeah. And the fact that it's okay.
Absolutely.
Right? I heard this on the Jocko podcast at one point in time, and he was just like, being in combat was the greatest experience of my life. And you know what? Yeah, absolutely. It was. I talked to Seb Lavoie. He's a RCMP ERT guy on my last podcast, and we were talking about synergy and like when you people just mesh and you start working together and everything starts just happening without you guys needing to talk, and you can just do things. And when you're under combat or when you're under contact and people are just, everything is happening.
The system moves.
And somebody asked me once about do you actually like think about what's happening and blah blah blah. And I told him the story. I was like, I was the guy, the dude that asks if your gas mask is part of the FFO.
Oh my God, I was just going to say, I'm like, are you there? Like, do we have to wear a helmet? Like, shut up.
Yeah, I'm that guy.
Yes, you know what, I remember, Burles, we do have to wear our helmet.
Yes, I am that guy, and I remember sitting on a wall in Afghanistan, and the boys had gotten into a big brew up the day before on a patrol, and so I finally got to go out. I had my machine gun. I was like excited. I was like, yeah, we're gonna get this, and you know that if they don't shoot at you by 9, they're probably not going to shoot at you that day. And it was like 8:55, and I was like, fucking son of a bitch. And I'm sitting on this wall. I'm like, man, if they don't shoot at me today, I'm going to be fucking pissed. Carrying around this machine gun for no goddamn reason. And within a minute, like right past my head, I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, it's on. But I was that guy, and I dropped my, I think I had like a 100-round teaser belt on my 9 and just threw it in that direction and started reloading. And I had a new box in, and I was throwing it down and racking the thing back before I even realized, like, oh, I think I need to reload.
Right?
Okay, I'm good. And then we just kept going.
Gosh, immediate actions do work.
They do hurt, but it's that synergy in that while I was reloading, my fire team partner was shooting. Like, I had just dropped to a knee. We didn't even talk about it. Just boom, he popped up, started shooting. I came back up, he went down, and all along the line, that was happening. People were just moving and shooting and and nobody talked about it. And it was unbelievably exhilarating to be working in that kind of environment. I think just specifically because of that, right? Like, there was no thought, there was no processing. It was just work, get it done, move to the next piece, blah, 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 blah. And I think in peer support, this is where you can gain that back. Because you're surrounded by people that know what that's
like.
And if you're having a hard time, like if I had a stoppage on my 9, I would just yell stoppage, and everybody would understand and do what needed to be done while I was sorting that out. And in peer support, if you're having a bad day, okay, cool. We'll all be
I had
there.
a bad day a couple days ago. Like, that's the conversation that you can have. Interestingly, before I started the Family Wellness Network, I was on my first deployment as a spouse. And we had a wicked argument the night before. And then he left in all hours of the morning. Cause why would we leave at normal times? And,
can't do that.
And I went to a close friend's house to drop something off, and she had a beautiful bouquet of flowers on her table. And in my head, I'm just like, oh yeah, your husband gets you flowers before you go? Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, those are really nice flowers. And I remember she looked at me and she's like, yeah, not really. We got in a huge fight last night and they're apology flowers. And I was like, wait, you got in a fight last night too? And it was that really just kind of blew things open for me, because it was normal. And I wasn't alone. How am I supposed to tell somebody that my husband's going into a combat zone and we got in a big fight? I'm a terrible spouse. No, man, that's normal. That's normal. Yep. This is we're decades into this, and it still happens. You learn to manage it a little bit better, but it's normal. And I imagine if I had that conversation, 5 deployments in, what those deployments might have looked like. staying at home. So I think, it's just so critical from like a mentor aspect and like the leading the change aspect. Like, and you don't even have to like do anything major. You can just, volunteering in itself as a peer supporter for an organization can literally change the direction or save someone's life. And that's not to be underestimated, like the value that really, really comes from that. And, I think that ties back to what we were talking about before about soldiers being able to see behaviors that will shape them so that, the CDS in 20 to 30 years, private so-and-so right now, is shaped in a way that's going to match the institution at that time. And I read like a little, like, I don't know if it was a Facebook meme or a quote or like whatever it was, but basically there was an anecdote about a sergeant major who like made it very known that he was like walking his way up the compound.
Yeah, and he would go to mental health, right?
And then someone's like, yeah, man, what are you there for? He's like, oh, I don't actually see him, and it's important for my soldiers to see that I go there. And that was just so emphatic for me because as a section commander, I witnessed that challenge physically where soldiers, walking through the doors to mental health is almost more challenging than making the appointment. And having somebody like literally just like walk you through those doors, it's no skin off my back. I have to be there anyway. Like, let's go. It normalizes it. And that's, it's a game changer. When I first came to the, I guess the JPSU at the time, I'm very open about seeing a therapist. I'm a firm believer that I think that we should all get them when we're 12, so we're not figuring out our daddy issues in our 30s. So that would be great. But, I see a therapist, like sometimes it's regularly, sometimes just maintenance. Sometimes I just need to like take my brain in for a tune-up. Like I rely on them. They're an incredible support system. So when I first came there, I was very open to be like, yeah, I've got a counseling appointment, or like my therapist said that. And you can see some people like, oh, did you just say therapist? Yeah. Like, yes, therapist. It changes my world in like so many ways. And, I thought that was, important as a leader, but it was specifically important in that organization because those are the individuals that require those services. So like, I don't know if anybody was ever like, oh man, Sergeant Young sees a therapist. Maybe I'll see one too. Or maybe it just like explained a lot about myself to those people too. So, it could go either way. But it really comes
a little of column A, little of column B.
But it's normalizing it because we're human. And that's, a big part of the military is that like, you're either a soldier or a human. Like you don't get to be both, but like we are both. And if we can integrate them more effectively and make it commonplace, we could be pretty powerful.
Well, you look at the special forces units around the world, and they've been incorporating this for the last 10, 15 years because combat has, like, especially in the States, you look at the SEALs or the Green Berets or Delta or like those high-level organizations all integrate peer support, they integrate therapeutic or therapy, they integrate like mental health. It's all developed into it because they've seen over the last 20 years of combat going, these guys are fucking crazy. Maybe we should try maybe do a little bit of like searching and try and figure out how to make this better. But I think it came down to like treating them like athletes, right? Like these people are, tier 1 assaulter dudes are basically Olympic athletes. They train at the same pace, the same level. They're constantly working, constantly learning, constantly developing. And the only way you really need to get to them is like, hey man, do you want to be better? And you're like, yeah. They're like, oh, okay, well, talk to this therapist. And, there was some hesitation in the first 10 years of Afghanistan and people going like, I don't want to talk to a doc. Yeah. But over the years, they're like, this actually helps. You're getting better, more actuated service members who can develop ideas and be introspective and think about things. And I tell the story a lot because, just human people, right? My granddad was an engineer in World War II. And for years, he thought of himself as a coward because he was not at the front doing the work up there. He was like rebuilding railroads and getting supply tracks getting started and all that stuff. And never talked about the war. I never heard him say a word about it up until like little tidbits that I'd hear from outside conversations as a kid, right? And 76 years, or well, he died a couple of years ago, so 74 years, something like that. He never said a word about it to anybody except for those little bits and pieces. And he suffered in silence for 70 plus years. And I remember getting back from Afghanistan, and I sat down with him, and he gave me a little nod, and I gave him a little nod, and we just kind of like we get it, right? And then he started talking to me about it, and then we started talking about it, and then we were able to converse about it because he had a peer in me all of a sudden. But without that, he would have gone his whole life. He would have died at 93 and been like, I never got to experience what that was like to have that connection. And he never went to Remembrance Day ceremonies, never did any of those things. And I like, after that little sit down when I first got back from Afghanistan, I'm like, I am never going to be that guy. I'm going to be as open and clear as possible about my own issues and my dealings with therapy. And I mean, I'm online pretty regularly now, and I'm posting stuff, I'm having a depressive episode. I feel like shit right now, blah, 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 because that's how we normalize it. That's how we say this is okay. It's perfectly fine. Just keep moving forward, right? You can't fall back on it and let yourself, just waste away to it.
Oh, and that goes back to the lead and change thing that you were talking about too, is where like you can be the person that's just like, today sucks. Like I got triggers out, like the hoops, they're everywhere, as opposed to just being like, no, I'm fine. Because like what happens when that person has triggers and they're like, oh no, I'm fine. And then you have something called generational trauma.
Oh, absolutely. I look at my mom, who was she was a hippie. She was 18 in 1968, and like did or 1970. Anyway, doesn't matter. She was a hippie. She used to like hitchhike across the states, like back in the 60s and stuff, like straight up hippie. Stories. Oh boy, yeah. We she didn't really like the fact that I wanted to join the army, but whatever. But I was gonna say, like, you can see the trauma from what she experienced with my granddad to what we experienced versus when we were her kids, and what I've experienced as an adult. And generational trauma is a very real thing. And if you don't stop it, it's just going to carry on. And you see this in alcoholics and people that have grown up in abusive families and stuff. It usually passes on to the next generation unless there's somebody that goes, no, I'm not doing that. And they left turn, I'm going to take this route. I'm going to take the hard way and like push through. But on that note, on an awesome high note, we've been rolling for about an hour and a half now. Love it. It's been a fantastic conversation. I can't thank you enough for being on here. There's going to be so many great points that people are going to pull from this, and I'm really excited. Do you have any final points, anything on peer support that you don't think we've covered, or want to get off your chest real quick? Like,
peer support's a very dangerous topic for me. Like, I could just go for like 8 more hours, but it's the process is hard, but the supports are out there. And if you're willing to put the work in to find the right connection, I don't want to make like a full sales pitch with like a complete 100% guarantee, but if you can connect with the right people, it can be life-changing. And they're out there, like you're out there, I'm out there. Like, I don't know if people want to connect with me, but like they can. Like there are people out there that have gone through this process and they're willing to help.
Yep. And the best thing is that you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have a full recovery tomorrow. You just need to get slightly better than you were yesterday. And if you can be slightly better than you were yesterday, then you have moved forward.
Absolutely. Or even if for a couple of days you just got to stay at the same place.
Yeah,
man. Mark time. Mark time. Yeah. It's cool.
Hold position. You're good, man. Just hang out. And when in doubt, rack out. Right? Just
I love it.
So if anybody would like to follow you, social media wise, do you have anything that, if you want, if not,
Yeah.
we can just
I
skip
feel
this.
like I'm old. Like I don't have Instagram or any of that kind of stuff. I'm legit on Facebook. You can reach me at Whitney Young, and like reach out to me on Facebook, and we can connect through email or anything like that. And virtual is pretty good too. So I'm a big advocate of that, and it goes back to the Army answer of like, if I don't know the answer, I'll find it for you. But if I can't provide that for you, I'll do my best to connect people to the resources that are out there.
Wicked. Well, again, thank you very much, Whitney.
You.
It has been my pleasure having you on here, and my flag is falling
I just noticed.
down.
I'm like, going down.
It's going down. Got to stop it before it hits the ground. But yeah, I can't thank you enough.
For having
it has
me.
been fantastic, and I hope to. I have another project that I'm working on that I think you might be in. You might want to be involved in. So hopefully we'll do that
let's
too.
connect.
Right.
That concludes this episode of The Toolbox. I really appreciate y'all listening. It has been my pleasure bringing you this awesome guest. If you like what you heard, please like, share, subscribe, and do all that awesome stuff. And I hope you can use some of the information that was offered. To all those putting on the line every day, first responders, military, veterans, civil servants, you guys are keeping us safe and keeping the country running. I really appreciate y'all. Hope to see you next time. Till then, stay open, stay humble, and stay focused. Shimo.